Gem International is a new diamond explorer in the richest diamond producing country in Africa, located next to the fourth largest producing diamond mine in the world. International Spotlight is on an 1109 carat diamond recently discovered in Africa by a fellow Canadian junior with a proven operator and finance team. Gem International trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol GI. Visit us at gemdiamondmining.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Martyn Element. He's a Vancouver marketing and corporate advisor who focuses on sourcing and pursuing new business ventures and opportunities. Welcome back to the show, Martyn.
Welcome to all the listeners.
Well, making the headlines in Canada, the failure of the Canada-European Free Trade Agreement because the people of Walloon in Belgium don't like it. Is it right that one small region of one small country can ruin a negotiation that has taken 7 years to take place?
Well, the obvious answer is you led me right up to it, is obviously no, it shouldn't. And, you know, for all of these people, a lot of them, particularly in central London, and people around the world that still think that Brexit is a bad thing, if that's not a perfect example of why it's not a bad thing, I can't think of a better one in our lifetime so far. I mean, that is just so ridiculous. And that tells you about this EU and where they're going with some of their thoughts and how they can have a system that's over-regulated, over in many different aspects of the meaning of the word overdone. And here's an example of how something has been left that one small region can veto 7 years of work. I heard the trade minister was in tears on this, the Canadian trade minister, and it just sounds just absolutely ridiculous to me, as it is ridiculous. 7 years. So, you know, now you've got the Nordic countries starting to get together as a group, and they're speaking as a group to the EU and saying, we think absolutely you should go really easy on Britain exiting, because what good is it going to do having a big spat and, you know, being spiteful? And then you have the EU saying that they're going to do all of the exiting in French and demanding that as one of the conditions of leaving. Well, you know, the language of the tongue that's spoken in the EU has been is English. So if that's not spiteful, I don't know what is. This whole divorce is going to be awful in many, many ways. It's no need to be awful, but it's probably going to be awful and brutal. And as you just pointed out, Jim, the pound is at an all-time low now. And, you know, you've got Sweden has stood up and said, well, this sounds good that their exports are going to be up, but our exports are down by over 20% across the board in all different kinds of industries into the UK because this krona is too strong, or it's just, but isn't it this krona is strong? The krona is just probably trading close to where it's been trading off and on for the last, years. But it's not that, it's that the pound is so weak. So people can't sell in, let alone, Britain's, that doesn't add to Britain because you've got the financial indexes in Britain coming into all-time highs because their products are cheaper, of course. So it's an evolving event. It's a major event. A good friend of mine, I mentioned this before, goes over the regulations for different products, and the numbers that he comes up with are unbelievable. Milk is like 1,000 things. Different kinds of regulations to do with the EU. And products and toasters are 112 regulations. And just all it is I think, is what we're suffering from in the world today is more and more government, more and more bureaucracy, more and more people on the payroll. And unfortunately, you don't have the working man, and the person who really does make the difference is caught in between all these terrible things going on in the world, trying to make a living. And you've got a terrible imbalance going on because you've got a communistic country the size of China, which has, still has very ingrained communistic ways of doing things. However, I hear the ridiculous number that the average citizen or business is supposed to only bring out $50,000. Well, that gives me a headache, a very sharp headache, just thinking about that number, because we all know how ridiculous that statement is when we look just where I live on the North Shore, when you see the most expensive cars on the planet being driven by 18, 19, 20-year-olds, not just one or two or the occasional one, just the norm. And it's that, one of those cars is worth more than what they're supposed to bring out. But so it's just a mockery. And it's, what was it that Bill Gates said the other day? He thinks there should be one universal government for the world. Now, is that pipe dreams, or what is that? But he does have a point, of course. And I think that's what will happen in our lifetime. It's probably not going to happen for quite a long time. But I think the reality that could happen perhaps sooner than we think. But at the moment, you've got saber rattling going on, and Russia sailing major warships right through the, I can't even believe I'm saying this, but Jim, I'm right in saying through the English Channel?
Yep.
Which is only 22 miles wide, listeners, or we're in Canada, so it should be kilometers. And by the way, that particular warship has a tug that travels with it because it breaks down so much. I mean, the whole thing is just, it's unbelievable is what it is. It's posturing at its worst. And then you've got this other pantomime that seems to be will come to an end on the 8th. And, that will probably result in more government and more of that feelings of, bureaucracy. So it is in a real mess in many, many ways, which leads me to one thing that's very prominent in this show, and I don't talk about it a lot. By show, I mean this medium is gold. And as much as I don't talk about it that much, I think that, unfortunately, the uncertainties aren't going to go away after the 8th. They're probably going to get, potentially, could get a lot worse. And I think that, unfortunately, in many ways, because things will get into more chaos, it bears well for the gold price. Although I see the copper price has been up a little bit just lately here in the last few days. And of course, all the copper stocks are doing a lot better here in Canada. So still a long way to go. At the moment, the market itself is moving sideways. I think there will be a lot of sideways motion until after the 8th, because people are just fearful of getting in or getting out into anything, whether it's an industrial stock, a gold stock, or a tech stock. I think there's an awful lot of sitting on hands going on. And I guess that is to be expected under the circumstances. The most powerful nation on earth still is about to elect a new president, and people want to get a feel for what will be a priority and what won't be a priority. And I think uncertainty is still very much with us, unfortunately.
We'll have more with Martyn Element right after the break.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Martyn Element. Martyn, you were talking to a friend in the insurance business, and they're worried about the advent of the robot car. I thought it would be good for insurance because statistically robot cars likely will have fewer accidents, but there's a downside to the insurers. Could you explain?
Well, not to be taking too much credit here, as I've said many times, a lot of people have different newspapers, but I really have liked the F&T, even though it would appear from an editorial position they were against BritX. But be it as it may, they had a couple of articles this weekend about the driverless cars. And they made two major points on reading the article. One was insurance could be in a lot of trouble for cars. And, most of these insurance businesses, huge percentage, massive percentage of their business, of course, is insuring motor cars. And they had a quote from Warren Buffett saying, I can't remember what the exact line was, but it was something like, well, I certainly won't be, from an insurance point of view, we won't be celebrating the fact, or something like that. He made a negative remark about insurance and cars. Well, because you're going to have tremendous amount of less accidents. It'll take a while to get there. Won't get in the first, 2020 is when we're going to start seeing a lot of we're going to start seeing driverless cars on the road, working along with other cars, and they will have passengers in them. But as the years go by, you're going to see a tremendous percentage being on the road of driverless cars, and the actual accidents will drop because you just won't have the human error factor and one thing and another. I know that's difficult to believe, listeners. It is difficult to put your head around that, but it is going to happen. And there'll be less, the premiums will be less, and the money will be less in the game of insuring cars and also, you have to imagine that you want to go from your place of your home, live on the North Shore, and if you pick it right timing-wise, unlike a lot of people up the valley from where we live, in the North Shore, if you're traveling at certain times, you can be downtown within 10 minutes, 11 minutes, 12 minutes, which is an amazing stat in itself, but you can. But what you'll do is you'll phone up and you'll order a car. You might not even own a car yourself. It'll be so easy. There'll be all these cars whizzing around. There'll be all of these non-owned cars running around. You'll phone up a car and say, could you pick me up at 5 after 9, please? Car will come to your house with nobody in it, arrive at your house. You'll get in the car. Car will take you downtown and drop you off. Well, what else does that mean, listeners? It means the other thing in the article from the F&G was that major car parks downtown will suffer terribly, because you won't be parking your car. You won't need to park your car. You'll be dropped off at the curb. Because then it goes back, or goes and parks it somewhere else where it isn't expensive to go and park itself. I know it's kind of like, it's so forward thinking. I realize that, but these are things, and they said also, of course, which I've mentioned before about the rule book. The rule book is still up in the air with writing the rules for these driverless cars because you've got so many, situations that's going to have to be worked out. And now I was talking to a fellow who owns one of the largest insurance companies here in the Lower Mainland, and him and his wife, and I said to him, I says, longer term, I says, 5-6 years, I says, I don't know if you want to be in the car. He blew me off. He blew me off, Jim. He didn't say, oh yes, we're worried about it. Oh, come on. And I thought to myself, that's wrong. I hear what you say, but, and it's, and he said himself, like, of his 100%, like 20% is housing and insurance. The rest is cars, all cars. So no, I think you're going to see, and plus you've got the electric factor too, Jim. And when these electric cars get into a space, you've got the combination of electric and you've got the driverless. When the electric cars come out en masse, and they're not Lamborghinis and Aston Martins and all of these exotics, the only exotic part of the car will be the interior. Because as it also said in the article from the F&T, was, the interior is going to be a kitchen, a bedroom, or whatever you want it to be. I mean, that sounds ridiculous, I know, but that's the articles. If anyone want to Google it, driverless cars, F&T, go ahead, you'll get the article I'm talking about. Fascinating reading, fascinating. Exciting times, and I'm off to Australia next week. There's a big show, Minds and Money show in Melbourne, Australia, and I'm going to be there on the 8th, 9th, and 10th in Melbourne, and it's all about lithium for Martyn Element, so that's what I'm going to be there for. Exciting times, and still having a lot of fun, but the first time in a long time.
Well, when you're in Australia, you said lithium. Australia and Canada are similar in a lot of areas where we need to export natural resources. How desperate have they been to find new markets, just like Canada has with the downturn in oil?
Well, they basically lead the world on, they lead the world arguably for exporting and for controlling. Not controlling is not the right word, but I think they definitely lead the world as far as spending money and exploring for lithium. And I'd say that they're a year to 2 years ahead of us here in Canada. And they're very aggressive. And of course, it's not just discovering the lithium and processing the lithium, which is very, very difficult. Technically, it's very, very difficult to do. It's having the offtake. It's great to say it's trading at, 5 times more than what it was 6 months ago, but it's having the offtake agreements. And yes, the Chinese are out there looking for offtake agreements for lithium, and the Australians are arguably leading the world on that front because we're behind them a little bit here in Canada, of course, and our type of lithium is different from theirs. Their lithium is more based on theirs is more on the brine, which is more prominent, of course, pertinent in Argentina, And what we have up here is the hard rock, which is, it's more difficult to process and arguably more expensive on all those other things. But interesting on the lithium front, Jim, but the Aussies are doing a great job of exporting themselves, as New Zealand. And as, of course, the little tiny island of Britain has done a fabulous job of exporting itself over the years. And I think it'll all happen again. And Canada isn't exactly a slouch either in that department. And we've got China right on our back doorstep, of course, which helps us a lot as long as we can keep the trade agreements in the right frame and everything else. So we're very lucky where we're positioned, particularly on the coast here, and we can see evidence of that every day with these huge piles of different types of things being shipped, particularly over to the Orient.
Martyn, take care in Australia, where they have the world's most poisonous everythings, it appears. And take a didgeridoo lesson or two.
Well, we'll be doing the show from there, so in about 2 weeks' time, I look forward to that. I'm sure I'll have lots of exciting things to talk about, what I've seen and doing and where I'm going and why and what in Australia, and have their take on a lot of different things.
Take care, Martyn.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
My guest has been Martyn Element, a Vancouver marketing and corporate advisor who focuses on sourcing and pursuing new business ventures and opportunities, no matter where they are in the world. You're listening to HowStreet.com Radio. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Questions can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com Radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com Radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.